Hi everyone, welcome back to Rabbi's Reflection. I'm glad that you're joining with me today. We'll be continuing in our study of Kitchen Table Wisdom by Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen, and today reading the story Attached or Committed. Stay with us as we read through the story and then offer some reflections. 35 years ago, I had as a patient a young man who had become separated from his ski party and spent 3 days in below zero weather, yet somehow had managed to survive. He had been hospitalized for several days in the ski country, and then flown to our center in New York because of frostbite and progressive gangrene of his feet. The local surgeons had wanted to amputate, and it was hoped that our world-renowned vascular surgical team could avoid this difficult choice. He had some initial surgery, and for 3 weeks the outcome was not clear. Then his left foot began to improve, and his right became steadily worse. The time for amputation at hand, the young man flatly refused. He preferred to keep his foot. Gradually he became sicker and sicker as the toxins from his injured foot began to flood his body. His family and friends were desperate, but he would not be moved. He would keep his foot. The situation came to a head late one evening, when for the third or fourth time a group of doctors shared his most recent laboratory studies and reviewed his worsening condition with him. In the midst of this discussion, his fiancée, overwhelmed by the possibility of her beloved's death, was driven beyond her endurance. Weeping, she tore his engagement ring off her finger and thrust it onto the swollen black little toe of his right foot. "I hate this damned foot," she sobbed. "If you want this foot so much, why don't you marry it? You're going to have to choose. You can't have us both." We all looked at the small, bright diamond, surrounded by the black and rotting tissues of his foot. Even under the fluorescent lights, it sparkled with life. The young man said nothing and closed his eyes with weariness. Weary ourselves, we left to continue the medical rounds. The next day, he scheduled his surgery. I continued to follow him through the fitting of his artificial foot and his rehabilitation. At the end of a year, only a slight limp marked his difficult choice. 2 weeks before his wedding, I revisited that final medical conference with him, asking him what had changed his mind. He said that seeing the diamond on his toe had shocked him. Jenny had been right. He had been married to his foot. Her dramatic gesture had helped him to see for the first time that he was more attached to keeping his foot than he was committed to his life, to their life together. Yet it had been the promise of that life that he had clung to, that had enabled him to survive 3 days alone in the snow. While attachment has its core in the personality, in what the Buddhists refer to as the desire nature, commitment comes from the soul. In relationship to life, just as in human relationships, attachment closes down options. Commitment opens them up. Modern life has made us people of attachment rather than people of commitment. Indeed, many people have found that it is difficult to tell the difference between attachment and commitment in their own lives. Yet attachment leads farther and farther into entrapment. Commitment, though it may sometimes feel constricting, will ultimately lead to greater degrees of freedom. Both involve in the moment an experience of holding, sometimes against the flow of events or against temptation. One can distinguish between the two in most situations by noticing over time whether one has moved through this activity or this relationship closer to freedom or closer to bondage. Attachment is a reflex, an automatic response, which often may not reflect our deepest good. Commitment is a conscious choice to align ourselves with our most genuine values and our sense of purpose. Survival in a setting of life-threatening illness may involve a willingness to let go of everything but life itself. Dr. Remen teaches us or brings us a better awareness of the relationships that we have in our life. What are the things, the ideas, the people that matter to us in life? And she makes us wonder about and question the relationship that we have towards those things. This is a really poignant, a beautiful story about an individual who tragically was in a ski accident and then miraculously was saved, even though he was really in a really bad situation. But he's then brought to the hospital to be able to see if his leg needs to be amputated or not. And they bring him to the special hospital where Dr. Remen is working in the hopes that they can save his leg from amputation. And it's not clear at first, but then it seems clear from the medical team that he needs to have his leg amputated, and he doesn't want to. And I think this is such a good story, or it provides us with such a good example, because I think for many of us who haven't had to have that experience, I think we don't know what we would do without a limb. A limb feels like such an integral and key part to our bodies and to who we are as people, to what our identity is. And so I really resonate with this man's hesitancy, because I could not imagine what it would be like to have to willingly cut off a part of my body. And it comes to such a tension that this foot that is kind of decaying and rotting is actually going to hurt and harm his body. He might actually suffer and maybe even die because of his unwillingness to have his leg amputated. At which point, as we learned in the story, the fiancée takes her engagement ring and she throws it on his foot or places it there and says, "What do you want? Do you want me? Do you want our family? Do you want what our life can be like together? Or do you want to be connected to this foot?" And that's what shifts his orientation into thinking into deciding to going ahead with the surgery. And then Dr. Remen, really beautifully, tries to help us understand the difference between attachment and commitment. It's a little hard because, as she says, for so many of us, those two words are really interchangeable. We don't think about what the difference between attachment and commitment are. But what she tries to talk to us or teach us, is that attachment is something that comes through kind of our personality, and that it ends up entrapping us, and we are kind of held back. We are closed off through our attachments. Whereas commitment is something that emanates or comes through the soul, and it opens us up, and it actually, in its what might seem as constricting, it actually gives us freedom. And I think the way to think about that, just as a helpful example, is perhaps finding the person that you love. You commit to them. Yes, there might be moments that you feel attached to them, and it might feel that it's a bad situation. But for a successful marriage or successful partnership, it's something that actually gives you freedom. It helps you live out your values and your purpose. And that by committing yourself to that individual, it actually opens you up and helps you kind of become the best person that you are. I think there are probably other good examples to share, but I'll stop at that one. So I ask us, each of us, as we're tuning in today and reflecting, what are the things that we're attached to in this world that we might be able to let go? And what are the things that we are either committed to already or that we need to recommit ourselves to in order for us to live our most whole lives? So I hope this is a helpful space for some reflection about that, and I look forward to seeing you soon.